I have my PhD in history, but I'm an expert in whooping it up. Woohoo!
White gloves and dirty documents. That's how this historian gets down. I am JMZ.
I'm a doctor, and my prescription is more shade.
Hello, welcome back to Historians on Housewives. You're here with me, Casey.
Dr. J. Mill, the millionairist.
Max Spear.
In this episode, we discuss the relationship between civil rights histories, integration, and segregation, and how that plays out in 1960s, 1970s, and reality television programming with our guest, Kate Flach. As we relate this conversation to recent developments on the Bravo network since the uprisings in the wake of the Breonna Taylor and George Floyd murders in 2020, we mentioned the Bravo firings a few times. For context, the network made a show of cleaning house to remove cast members on the Vanderpump Rules series, including Kristen Dowdy, Stassi Schroeder, Max Boyens, and Brett Caprioni, over past racist actions. While Jax Taylor and Brittany Cartwright weren't immediately fired with those previously mentioned, viewers clamored for their firings both over racist actions and for ongoing homophobia, including selecting a homophobic pastor for their wedding ceremony. Ultimately, Taylor and Cartwright parted ways with the network. Then, Bravo proceeded to offer a series of haphazard anti-racist allyship episodes and attempted to integrate the various Real Housewives franchises with adding women of color. This resulted in the canceling of the Real Housewives of Dallas, the suspension of the Real Housewives of New York, a long delay before relaunching the Real Housewives of Orange County, and a floundering Southern charm. Kate's going to contextualize both these current events and these historical dynamics, as well as show us how similar the modern Real Housewives formula is to An American Family reality television show from 1973. Kate Flach received her PhD in history from the University of California, San Diego in 2018. Currently, she is a lecturer at California State University, Long Beach, and is revising a book manuscript based off her dissertation titled Living Room Liberalism, Politics, Television, and Social Change, 1960 to 1980. So with that, welcome, Kate Flach.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to share your Real Housewives tagline to get started?
I would. I might study television, but I write my own script.
Ooh, good one. That's a good one.
Thanks.
So I actually got to present with you on, WAWH, the Western Association of Women Historians. That's what the acronym stands for, in 2016. So I met you years ago, and I absolutely loved your work on that panel. It was very exciting. I actually think about you every time that All in the Family comes up as a television show to talk about when I'm in the 1970s. And so I wondered if you could tell us about your academic journey and how things have come to be.
Sure. Well, when I presented next to you at that conference, I was pregnant at the time. And so I have since had the baby since 2016. And
congratulations.
Thank you. After that, I finished writing my dissertation after the baby and defended in December 2018. And at the time, I was living in Colorado Springs because my husband, who's also a historian, had a postdoc at Colorado College, but he got a tenure track job at California State University, Long Beach.
Congratulations. That's another big thing to celebrate.
And so I was hired as a lecturer there, and so we moved back to Southern California. We now live in Long Beach, and I have been teaching as a lecturer since the fall semester 2019. So I'm finishing my second year. I absolutely love working there. But yeah, so that's been my journey since we last presented together.
That's really exciting. That's lots of good stuff.
Have you always been interested in TV? How did your reality TV interest develop?
I've always been interested in television on a personal level. I would consider myself a TV kid. When I was younger, I would spend the night at my grandmother's house because we did not have cable when I was a kid at my mom and dad's house. And so I loved going there because she had cable and I'd spend time with her. And on the weekends, I would watch all of my Nickelodeon shows until Nick at Night came on. And she would kick my grandfather, who had usually fallen asleep on the couch at that point, kick him out off the couch. He would go to bed and we would watch all of the old TV shows together and stay up really late and talk. Same with my dad. I remember watching old television shows with him when I was younger as well. But academically, I became interested in television when I started my master's program at the University of Akron. Oddly enough, I wanted to be an early modern U.S. historian, and I was initially interested in lynching photography. And my interest in lynching photography actually transitioned into an interest in television because I was interested in the power of the photographer and what it meant to use photography in a way to take power away from Black people, particularly in the South. Now, as I became interested in that topic, I then sort of followed that interest to studying the murder and lynching of Emmett Till, and particularly the use of his mother and using his funeral and images of his dead body to publicize the brutalization of lynching and racism in the Jim Crow South. And thinking about her as using her middle class, presenting herself in a way that really emphasized her middle class status. She was very well dressed and very well spoken, and the ways in which newspapers, not nationally, but even internationally, talked about her and her role in that position, really sort of is where my interest in television developed. I made the connection between representations of Black middle class women. I made that connection between Mamie Till, Emmett Till's mother, and the show Julia, which starred Diane Carroll in 1968 to 1971. And thinking about how that show, which focused on a widowed single mother of a son who lived in an integrated apartment in Los Angeles. She was middle class, very well dressed, very well spoken. And so I started to make those connections and really sort of developing my interest in Black middle class motherhood in that way. And then my interest in television just continued to grow from there.
Okay, I was trying to figure out how I would follow up that excellent and really moving discussion on how you came to your topic. I actually became a historian because of Emmett Till. So I'm over here listening to you saying, yes, that's right. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit more about Julia, but as you were speaking, one of the things that occurred to me is the way in which reality TV right now, we have had to, with every season opening, we've had to look at some reference to George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, which is great for the regular public. But for some of us, we are very, very triggered. So I wanted to hear a little bit about what you think about what some of the Bravo shows are doing in terms of Black Lives Matter or even covering the pandemic. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what's happening that is a little bit different from the way that reality television and specifically the Housewives is overlapping with current events. It is different within the context of the pandemic and specifically Black Lives Matter, as opposed to the way that the Real Housewives overlapped with real events during, say, like the 2016 election, which I specifically am thinking about the Real Housewives of New York, when Carol is like watching the election on television and everyone is sort of either feeling what she's feeling or some of Ramona's friends who were like very excited for Trump winning. And so you're reliving the election by watching the Real Housewives of New York in that way. And then I was also thinking about how the effects of the Great Recession played out on the Real Housewives of Orange County when it did. I don't remember exactly which season that was in particular. But this seemed to be something that was celebrated, as if like the Housewives now are becoming a primary source for being able for future generations to look back and sort of see how these events played out in real life and how they're reflecting a lot of the ways in which people are, emotionally responding to them. The pandemic and Black Lives Matter has not quite done that, whereas I feel like the treatment of the pandemic and watching a bunch of women get together and somehow seemingly, not really follow any CDC guidelines, although I'm sure that they are tested, I think that's become kind of cringeworthy for a lot of people. Even though that I think for a lot of Americans, that is how they actually did treat the pandemic. And then what's interesting with Black Lives Matter in particular is how that topic is sort of influencing the direction of the show as much as it's influencing the responses from the women who are on TV. And what I mean by influencing the direction of the show is I think that the show felt like there was an obligation to respond to these events in a way that they had typically maybe glossed over or felt like if it didn't naturally come up in some way that it was okay to not cover it. But I'm curious what you all think about how they are treating the pandemic and Black Lives Matter in that way.
Well, can I actually throw us into kind of a conversation about how Andy Cohen is trying to navigate this?
Yes.
He's been really vocal, and the articles are coming out about how he feels like Housewives shouldn't be, canceled or, judged, receive the kind of fan hate that they get because of their political stances. And I feel like this is watching Andy Cohen try to justify the actions of some of his favorites in live time as they come under fire, especially for how they've maybe handled COVID or for their political support of Donald Trump in the 2020 election, not just the 2016 election. And so I wonder if that is also an important part of this conversation, because then it also seems to me that it's a way of saying that he didn't agree perhaps with the Vanderpump Rules firings that came in the wake of the George Floyd murder.
So
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Kate. Please go ahead.
Yeah. What's interesting about The Real Housewives is I would say that it's probably one of the few shows where you have a cross-ideological audience watching the television show, meaning you're going to get people who consider themselves liberal and conservative who are viewers. Now, I know that they have revealed in a recent article, like the breakdown, I think out of all of the franchises, The Real Housewives of Atlanta typically has the most liberal viewership. And I can't remember if it was OC that had the most conservative viewership, but I still think that there's going to be crossover with a lot of those shows. And so it allows for this dialogue to happen in a way that other shows that are maybe normally considered something more for like a liberal viewer and conservatives don't engage with, and then vice versa. And so because you have both of these types of audiences watching the show, it allows for this type of conversation to happen. But you can't have it both ways. And I think that's what Andy Cohen is trying to do, especially with Bravo TV, sort of have their cake and eat it too, by showing that they care and they are listening and they are making these adjustments for shows that have, for their programs that have, you know, all black cast, like the way that it has become a storyline through Atlanta, but then criticize or say that, you know, we can't have the same type of treatment for these other shows for the people he might have as his favorites, like Ramona Singer or the women on OC. You know, you can't talk about race on one show and then, you know, engage in this type of dialogue that's very much political and very politicized, and then sort of condemn people for applying that same sort of politicized analysis and critique of another, one of the other series in a different city. And so I think that his frustration is trying to balance these two things in which he's not capable of doing, because obviously the type of people who watch The Real Housewives, you know, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed audience. And so how do you square those two things?
And he's really been coming under fire, I think more so than ever before, in regards to his treatment of Black women. When he gets to reunions, and it's painfully obvious that he has a different standard that he holds with the white housewives.
Right. I've noticed that too, and his accountability.
Yeah.
Would we be noticing this had Nene not brought it up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Right. Because it's always been a theme, right? That the quote unquote violence of the Black housewife, which is a horrendous racial stereotype that Andy Cohen perpetuates.
I absolutely agree. I'm being the advocate here. I absolutely agree. The Black women are loud and they're angry, and even the people who come on the show, I'm thinking about Jennifer Shaw. She's mimicking a particular kind of Blackness of being loud and angry,
even though she's not Black herself.
Right. Now the criminality. Now that is mimicking some of the white women on Housewives and Apollonida, but the criminality associated with Jen Shaw that doesn't necessarily match with some of the other stereotypes.
Or I mean, even if you break down the way that Apollo was treated and talked about as a quote unquote criminal, right? But white housewives who have had criminal charges are treated much, much differently.
You mean the Free Juicy campaign and the Free Teresa campaign?
Or the fact that you can even go on Etsy and like get coasters of their mug shots, right? As like a set, like, Real Housewives of Prison, and with it's really quite disgusting.
Even though wasn't Apollo, sorry, Kate, I'm going to let you jump in just a minute. Weren't Apollo and Joe in the same prison at one point?
Oh, maybe. I don't remember.
I think they at one point they were in the same prison, or I feel like this was in the blogs. I will have to go back and make sure it was in an actual credible source that said this and not something else. But anyway, Kate, I've overtalked you. Please, you're the expert. Talk to us.
Oh no, I love this. No, I was just thinking that the White Housewives have evaded this sort of stereotype of violence that has landed on the Atlanta housewives. Because I keep thinking about not just Jen Shaw, but Tamra Judge was the first housewife to throw a glass at someone, if I remember correctly, a wine glass. And they, between Tamra and Kelly Dodd and
oh my God,
even Ramona,
they are so loud and so vile and so angry in the way that they get in people's faces and even coming into their personal space, throwing objects, and that type of stereotype just doesn't land with them.
And that's before you even get to New Jersey and, brandishing broken glass at each other and flipping tables.
Let's not forget.
Yeah, and the flipping tables.
Not yet.
Right, yeah.
Have we mentioned pooping on people's floor? Pooping on people's floor?
Well, I was going to say that Ramona threw that glass and cut Kristen's lip at the lake only a few seasons after Tamra threw the wine glass.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about all of these. Yeah. And even I was thinking too, Vicky and Tamra, when they got Gretchen naked, wasted, and like even the, how that storyline kind of parallels the storyline of Atlanta with Portia and Candy, right? These threats of getting someone inebriated in order to, manipulate them or to do something with them. But that was a very similar storyline, and it just didn't stick the same way that it did.
But on OC, it actually happened. We saw them giving Gretchen alcohol, right? There's just a rumor. Now,
we saw her son trapping Gretchen in a room.
Right.
It was some of the darkest television I think I've ever seen.
It was uncomfortable to watch.
But let's bring Tamra back for the Real Housewives All-Stars. Okay, so there were so many things you said. I want to go back to this issue / thought of Bravo and the Housewives and reality TV right now being a primary source that people will look back on. Here at the Bravo Demic show, we enjoy using Bravo in classes all the time. Can you talk a bit more about how it could be a primary source? Or is it just obvious because we're all scholars?
Well, Well, it's a primary source on a couple of different levels because it's going to be a primary source for how a certain person of class and race and gender status are experiencing these major historical events, like the Great Recession, like the pandemic, that sort of thing. But the way in which I study television is it's not just what the source is presenting to audiences. That's one part of it. But the other is how audiences are responding to what they're watching on television and really unpacking, just like how we were talking about just now, some of the ways in which the responses to these television events are very much racialized, how they are gendered. And sort of getting a bigger sense of the way that people are thinking about and engaging with the discourse about race and gender, in 2020 or in 2009 with the recession and things like that. So it's a primary source, not just in showing how the Housewives are experiencing these events, but how we as viewers are responding to what we're watching and how that's being portrayed.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the theme for the need of realness in 1970s sitcoms that you came across in your research and how this all comes together in your first book project that you're working on right now, titled Living Room Liberalism, Politics, Television, and Social Change, 1960 to 1980. And of course, we want to hear all about your process of transitioning your dissertation into a book. So there's lots of stuff here, and wherever you want to go with it is great.
Sure. I actually discovered the theme for realness in early 1960s television. I think that I thought it would be later, especially when we think about these famous shows that are associated with Norman Lear's productions, like All in the Family and Good Times, Maude. But I was really struck by how television producers of the early 1960s were using this term, realness, or thinking about telling it like it is. That was a phrase that they would use very frequently. They wanted to make television as realistic as possible. And so as I dug deeper in my archival research, I noticed that there was not just a correlation in the way that television producers were thinking about producing TV in the early 1960s, but that there was an actual connection between the political and the cultural worlds here. They were very much influenced by John F. Kennedy's New Frontier political platform. They were in dialogue with each other, some of the people from John F. Kennedy's administration, and they wanted to incorporate a lot of his ideas into the television shows that they presented. So this, of course, places the creation of early TV shows within a Cold War and civil rights context. But I started to notice that as the direct political influence in the direction that TV producers were creating television, the influence that it was. I feel like I should rephrase that. There was a direct influence from politicians in the direction that entertainment television was going. This had to do with a lot of things. One thing in particular was the Cold War. So as television was being aired internationally, John F. Kennedy expressed concern along with his famous FCC chairman, Newton Minow, who famously declared that television was a vast wasteland. But Minow and Kennedy both expressed concern that television, what was airing on TV with these zany housewives and these Western shows and lots of violence, that was going to make the United States look bad in their fight during the Cold War. How could anyone make a claim for democracy when what they were watching in terms of American television consisted of just superficial, fluffy entertainment? And so there was a push from the FCC at that time to not make, television news better, to not just improve that sector of television, but actually to make entertainment television better. And so they used the power of the FCC to sort of, push producers into creating more meaningful content. And they used the language of Kennedy's New Frontier to do that, to say that they needed to sacrifice profits in order to have their moral compass really guide the way that they wanted to create TV. The Cold War and some of these Cold War ideas were not as interesting to the American public, but with the overlap of the civil rights movement and how much that was being presented on television news, it seems like a natural way to sort of increase more realistic content into entertainment TV. This wasn't simply altruistic. I mean, there was a lot of pushback from the NAACP for years for the entertainment industry to include more diversity in the television and film industries. And so they were responding to not just the appeals of the FCC in terms of making sure that they could renew their broadcasting license, but also from responding to, civil rights demands on behalf of activists who were making a claim as to why they needed to hire more African Americans in the film and TV industry. And then also the argument was made on behalf of activists, too, that echoed Kennedy's New Frontier, which is to say that if you want to make TV more realistic, it is unrealistic to exclude African Americans from the television landscape. So they were really using that language to make arguments for why they needed to be included. And so as television starts to make these attempts to become more realistic in entertainment television, how that realism, was presented changes over time. I document this as a transition from problem solving to problem consciousness. So anybody who has ever watched an old TV show from the early 1960s and even mid-1960s probably is aware of that type of programming where you learn a lesson at the end and there's some sort of like moral message to as the takeaway at the end of a sitcom or drama. And so it's very more direct what the lesson is of every episode. But by the time you get to the late 1960s and early 1970s, especially with the development of these Norman Lear productions, you start to move towards a way to make more realistic content in a way that would arouse people's consciousness about certain problems. So rather than teaching viewers explicitly, how to integrate society, or how to integrate a public school, for example, an episode in Good Times might be just about sort of showing people and making the viewers aware of the type of issues someone living in the projects might have. So you're not necessarily learning a specific lesson, but you're arousing your consciousness about what it is like for other people living in different parts of the U.S. and what their experiences are. So out of this naturally comes the first reality TV show, which was An American Family, and it debuted in 1973. And so you get a reality television show because it's sort of part of this larger trend of television producers who want to try to continuously make television as realistic as possible. I view the first reality TV show to also be reflective of this larger, activist context in terms of thinking about the use of consciousness raising and the way in which we're talking about our feelings, and that's also steeped in a therapy culture that is specific to like the popular psychology of the 1970s. But the first reality TV show is interesting because it really mimics the Real Housewives programs that we're familiar with today. I guess I could talk a little bit about An American Family. Should I do that?
Totally. This is the first time I'm hearing this. I thought the first reality show was Battle of the Network Stars.
Okay. Well, An American Family, they filmed in 1971 and 72. It aired in 1973. But the premise of the show was to sort of document like the last American family or what's left of it, because it's the 1970s and we have this increase in divorce rates and feminism and the sexual revolution. And so the producer of this show wanted to document an American family meeting as if it was this sort of dying entity. And so he chose an upper middle class family in Santa Barbara. It was a husband and wife, and I think 5 children, maybe it was 4 or 5, I can't recall. And they filmed for, I can't remember how many months exactly. I would say it's close to a year. And they wanted to just really document the ins and outs of the family. They wanted the family to sort of get used to being filmed. They had lighter cameras at this time, so it allowed for the portability of cameras and cameramen to travel with the family. They also installed cameras all over the house and used the same type of essentially like surveillance technology that Richard Nixon used to record himself in the White House. That technology was new, so they used it in the production of the first reality TV show. And it allowed, with the hidden cameras and the bugging of the telephones and stuff, it allowed for the family to, what they wanted to at least, was to forget that they were being filmed, so that they could, really get on camera, them existing within their natural state. But in the process of filming this show, the wife ends up telling her husband that she wants to file for a divorce at the end, and their eldest son comes out of the closet. And so it really becomes this very sensationalized TV show. And just like the Housewives, they film all of this footage, and then they edited it so that they could pull through certain storylines when they're airing it to the American public. And so obviously their divorce was a storyline, the coming out of their eldest son, Lance, was a storyline. And then before the show aired, after this was said and done, they had interviews with the husband and wife separately to sort of talk about what the experience was like for them. Very much similar to like the testimonials that the Housewives do when they're being interviewed throughout the season, And because they talked about how they eventually, the filming of the show didn't lead to their divorce, but how it sort of filmed the unfolding and unraveling of their marriage. Viewers knew from the very beginning of the series that this is what was going to happen in the end. So I just think that it's interesting that the format of the first reality TV show actually mirrors the format of The Real Housewives as we know it. But yeah.
Okay, here's my knowledge of American Family now that you've described it. I believe there was a Saturday Night Live skit around the American Family, but no one got it. And I don't even know how I know this random fact, but I feel like that I am going to go deep into the SNL archive and find this. And I'll also add that, Wendy Williams does say that no one should do reality TV because their marriage will fall apart. So there we go. Change over time. None. Yes. I'm done inserting.
Continuity. Yeah. There was a second part of that question, but I already forgot what it was.
Was there?
It's okay. I don't remember.
It's the end of the quarter semester. Was there?
Oh yeah, I know.
So liberalism can be a tricky word and concept to define, and particularly discuss with students. So I'm interested to know, how do you define liberalism, and then how do you teach liberalism in the classroom?
Ooh, good question. Well, I don't really define liberalism in a clear-cut, neat definition. I do teach it as a set of ideas that develop over time. When I teach it, I start with the expansion of the welfare state under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But when I get to the 1960s, I really teach about the development of liberal ideology as something that's rooted in John F. Kennedy's New Frontier and Johnson's Great Society. And so with that, there are certain themes that are specific to this 1960s liberalism, specifically themes about eradicating poverty, using the state to create social welfare programs that are specific and related to jobs, alleviating racial unrest. And so I teach it more as like a set of ideas that are associated with liberalism, as opposed to having students come away with a neat definition. But in my research, I use the term cultural liberalism to mean something that's specific to television in particular. I borrowed the term actually from Daniel Widener. He uses the term cultural liberalism in his book, Black Arts West. And he specifically talks about it in relation to how white liberals from the entertainment industry came into Watts after the 1965 Watts uprisings and created these writers' workshops that allowed, Black people in Watts to express themselves through cultural expression, to write poetry, through different forms of art, and how they use, and so how these white liberals sort of created a space that was meant to not just allow for cultural expression, but at the same time teaching Black people in this area skills that could be applicable for jobs down the road, essentially.
Okay.
And so what I do, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I use that term in relation to television. So sort of moving beyond past Watts and going all the way into the 1960s and 70s. But I even think that the way Bravo is responding to some of these TV shows, to some of the moments recently, is sort of reflective of this type of cultural liberalism. So with cultural liberalism, I essentially mean how white liberals in the television industry thought that they could educate viewers while also facilitating racial reconciliation, while also providing jobs to African Americans in the entertainment industry. So it's essentially merging these political goals with authentic representations in the construction of television production. And in the process, they used certain things that were very specific to cultural liberals, like they really relied on the experts, and they wanted to. And so one of the ways in which they did that was for white liberals to say, like, I can't write TV shows for Black people. We need to create programs that will allow African Americans to become television writers so that they can translate their experience to the small screen. So they created these job training programs that would not only allow them to create a pipeline for African Americans to enter the entertainment industry, but then in the process make television itself more realistic and improve the quality of TV as well. And then as a result of that, simultaneously educating the American public about race issues.
Okay, so this is my disclaimer. I want to go back to the Watts Arts movement. And, because I understand what you're saying about TV, and you would think that if these programs for more inclusivity had actually worked, we wouldn't be where we are now, which is still a lack of people of color in the writing room, minus Shonda Rhimes. Okay, minus Shonda Rhimes. I'm saying until recently. I want to go off as a history nerd, but I also want to stay to the topic. So maybe we'll have an after talk about some of these questions I have. There's a whole back narrative to African American artists and being creatives in and of themselves. So I'm trying to stay close to this cultural liberalism argument, which I understand, without giving the other side of the story. So that's why I'm struggling over here. So,
you can go there if you'd like.
It's like the 20th and 21st century. I'm not comfortable there. Like, I think I know what I'm saying, but I'm not comfortable. So I'll just leave it with, and I haven't read Danny Widener's book. I know the argument, but I haven't read the book. I'll just leave it with, we also need to say that as much as this activity was going on in Watts, there are the four poets and the Watts Arts Workshop, I believe, and other things coming out of Watts that are generated for and by Black people. So I just wanted to say that kind of disclaimer versus, I mean, when we look at HBCUs, we know it was white liberal philanthropists and white churches that set up HBCUs. But that also, for example, comes from a tradition of Black people already educating themselves. So I just felt like I just wanted to give that other point of view, because I completely hear what you're saying about cultural liberalism. Let me just transition to this. Maybe I haven't had enough caffeine today because I'm not feeling like I'm articulating anything. We know that MLK and other civil rights leaders understood the role that the media could play in advancing a cause. And we also know there's extensive literature on the impact of TV and on the civil rights movement and vice versa. So can you give us some examples of where we would see this? And then what is the relationship between television and integration, and I would even add segregation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the history of television and the civil rights movement is usually always sort of specific to television news, and you might get some of those like special reports or special documentaries, but it's always usually specifically related to television news. what I'm trying to do is to say that we can look at the history of the civil rights movement and entertainment television and sort of broaden our understanding of the relationship between those two parts of, culture and politics in that way. But what's interesting about entertainment television in particular is, especially when there are these efforts to increase Black voices and Black representation on television, at least historically, and I'm finding this based off of the small little things that I'm seeing in relation to some of the changes in representation just in the last year for Bravo, is that you're receiving this backlash from people who feel like integration is being forced upon them in their homes through the type of content that they're watching. And so this is what I saw specifically in 1968 or after 1968, because there's a dramatic increase in television shows, in sitcoms in particular, more so than dramas. But even so with dramas, but an increase in Black representation. And so you have a lot of white viewers who are writing in to these networks claiming that integration is being forced upon them. And so I always sort of try to distinguish the difference between segregation and integration, at least within a television landscape, because I feel like when it came to this famous television imagery of civil rights activists who were fighting against racist segregationists in the South, the story is often told this generated a lot of sympathy among white viewers in particular. And so I think that there's a difference between documenting the fight against segregation as opposed to having television actually represent the effects of integration into TV and then, simultaneously into people's homes. And so based off of what I'm hearing a little bit about from Bravo, there's an interview where Leva from Southern Charm is interviewed, and she just quickly says in one statement, she was getting a lot of heat from viewers who were saying that her presence, not just the presence, her physical presence on the show, but her insistence on talking about race as they were filming in the middle of the protests in response to George Floyd's murder that summer in the South, that her insistence on talking about race really ruined the show for a lot of viewers and, made them, that's not why they watch Southern Charm. And so there's a parallel with the ways in which there's these increase in representation. It's usually followed by a backlash in how people feel like it's sort of ruining their viewing experience.
Wow.
Well, we're going to be able...
I like that twist. I like that integration, segregation twist. Wow.
And we're going to kind of wrap a lot of this up, I think, talking about Southern Charm in the second half of the interview. So I don't want to let us tip the hand too much before we get there.
Okay.
But this is also great. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on these connections between the Black freedom struggle and the culture wars and how that plays out on television programming.
Yeah. So that's a good question to think about the Black freedom struggle and culture wars, because it very much gets entangled, especially with, as I had mentioned before, there's, it's not just about representation as much as, although that's part of it, but I feel like it's just the representation of the ideology. And I think that's where the Black freedom struggle, meets the culture wars and where that tension is coming from. So what can I talk about? Well, I guess I don't want to get ahead of myself, but
you
I have
can talk
example
about whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
That nod was for me not to jump ahead. The production nod a minute ago was for me not to jump ahead.
Okay. So the way that I viewed the connection between the Black freedom struggle and the culture wars is more in line with how there is diversification in the ideology as much as the representation. So what Bravo TV had a history of doing before was sort of this insert and stir when it came to any sort of diversity on their white franchise shows, So thinking about the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, when they had Joyce, I can't remember her last name. Joyce, who was, I think maybe the first non-white cast member. She was Puerto Rican. And so they include her, of course, in that series. Brandy Glanville makes one of the most heinous racist remarks that I do feel like Andy Cohen really let her off the hook with, in terms of making a comment about how Black people can't swim.
Well, that's not a political statement, obviously.
Yes, exactly.
But it is. But it is, because Max
was being sarcastic.
Yeah,
right. Clearly, I want to talk about the session that I went to yesterday about African divers in Africa in the 17th and 18th century. So back to Andy being racist.
Yeah.
Back to Andy being racist.
Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, with some, and then Kelly Dodd is another example, right? Like, they insert these women of color and stir, and then it doesn't disrupt the show. But what you're seeing in the last year, as they're trying to really diversify these all-white casts, and I'm going to talk about a series now that I've never watched, but I read all of the Bravo blogs, so I feel like I know a lot about it. But the example is for the Real Housewives of Dallas, which I don't watch. And they've recently added Tiffany Moon, Dr. Tiffany Moon, to the cast, who is Asian American. And from what I understand, based off of the Bravo blogs, there's a lot of tension between her and this other white cast member who previously made a racist remark against Asian Americans in the past. Who do you all watch Dallas? Do you know her name?
Yes, we've been watching. I've been watching because
her name
of
is
Tiffany.
Also Brandy.
Yes,
as a matter of fact.
Okay.
True.
Different
they've got a real theme going on at Bravo.
Never trust a Brandy.
Yeah.
Or at least Brandy with an I, maybe, is what we should say.
Oh, okay.
No, Glanville also has an I.
Is she white?
They,
aren't they both Brandys with an I?
Whatever. Go on. Sorry to derail.
So I feel like I'm talking in circles here. I hope I'm making sense. But what I'm trying to get at is there's this previous thing that they did with insert women and stir, and it worked out. But now they're starting to see that when you're putting these non-white women into these all-white casts, and now race is a central part of the storyline for at least the women of color. What is happening is, and this is what Andy Cohen is getting at when he says, like, that's not the vibe of the show that Bravo's trying to go for. It changes the meaning of the show. It changes what the show was supposed to be. It's no longer escapism. And this is something that some of the viewers are also complaining about as well. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that you would think that by inserting women of color into an all-white cast and having the discussion of race really change the entire tenor of the entire show, that would elicit some sort of reflection on behalf of Bravo TV to say, well, what does this say about the way our show is constructed? Theoretically, what does it say about the way that the show is cast? To have some sort of introspection. Answering those questions is going to get at how and why and what institutionalized racism looks like within the television industry, but they seem to be failing to make this connection. So what I'm trying to get at is to say that these shows work out fine if you introduce a woman of color and they just essentially never talk about race. But when that ideological addition to the show is then added, then all of a sudden, this is where you can really see the ways in which the long tradition of institutionalized racism is really playing out in these TV shows. And rather than Bravo reflecting on that and saying, what can we do to change this? What does this mean about our show? They're sort of doubling down on, just falling more towards the escapism side of the entertainment, but even sort of not, failing to understand what escapism, how you can't talk about race and escapism together, is a failure to understand and a shortcoming on their end, I think.
Well, and fans have always known, right, that you can't get around this race issue. For example, fans with Roa and Kim Zolciak in the early years, and it was always there, and people who could claim escapism. I just don't think A, wanted to see these issues, or B, had even ever considered that they existed.
I don't think that's what the issue is. because if you go back to the first season of RHOC, the several people on the show throw around homophobic slurs all over the show.
But that's what I'm saying, is that the people that would claim that this was always escapism for them, they would see no problem with it.
No, that's what I mean. So suddenly somebody's in the cast or peripheral to the cast, like one of the friends of the show, or somebody's in the cast, like Dr. Tiffany Moon, and that suddenly makes people uncomfortable. Because suddenly, like, casual homophobia, or in this case, casual racism against Asian Americans, like, doesn't fly.
That's what I'm saying. I think I just... I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought up the example of Roa, because that was always part of the dynamic with Kim Zolciak in the early years, too. Yeah. So... Thanks. I'm glad we were saying the same thing.
I just said it with a little more like,
I think we need to qualify to anyone listening. We are all in the end of the quarter, the end of the semester, or midway through the quarter. A year of doing Zoom, a year of everything. I think we're all falling apart.
I mean, we have, like I said, we have teething now. We have bicuspids growing in. So I have been awake this whole week. So I might not be as articulate as normal. But now... Oh, sorry.
I feel the same way. Like, I don't know if my last answer just made sense at all, but I guess what I'm trying to say is they had instances where some of the all-white casts weren't always all white, and it never was a problem before. And I think it's because Bravo never let it become one. Mm-hmm. You know, like the Brandy issue with Joyce, like that should have really played out more, and they really should have engaged that comment much more in the show, and they didn't. And so now with these cast members who are sort of, you know, really bringing race to the table in these shows and not letting it die down in one episode or half an episode, I think that's what's changing the show. And so there is something going on with Bravo that's changing.
Is it that something with Bravo is changing? I mean, yes, Bravo is trying to like rebrand itself during this moment, but is it that Bravo is changing, or that... in the midst of all of this, like in between Orange County coming out in the mid-2000s to now, Bravo has a much higher social media presence. And so...
Well, social media is even a much, much bigger thing than it ever was in 2008.
Yeah, and like now it's like a thing to comment on Twitter, for instance. Like I had to get off Twitter, like my personal account, to get off because I just got so invested in like these fights where it would like consume my day. But like now you have people having serious debates with the Bravo TV hashtag. And so like somebody at Bravo has to at least record on some level, like what are people saying about these shows as they're happening, right? Like now there seems to be a little bit more fan interaction with the content on the show, whereas before, so I don't know, it just seems a little Pollyanna-ish for these people who say like the shows were never political, they were, you know, or that like they were always escapism. I think that it's just now like the mode of communication is so much more immediate, and like people's responses are so much more diffuse like across society that like it's hard to ignore the racist element in the room.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Bravo wants to change.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of this is just lip service. And the point I was trying to make, which I don't know if came out clearly, is by just saying like, okay, all we have to do is add a woman of color to all of these Housewives franchises. And like, this is going to fix the problem. And what it's doing is really putting a magnifying glass on what exactly the problem is with Bravo. And rather than reflect on that and see that as a reflection of their show and what they're producing, they're saying it's just, you know, it's no longer escapism anymore. It's no longer fun.
Right. Well, even just as they, you know, vet people before they put them on the television, it's clear that they never, you know, before thought it would be any issue to cast people who have, you know, have made habits of using racial slurs on social media. There's been so many points where they could have pulled back and chosen a different option. And I feel like choices they've made to then, for example, in Below Deck, to then edit out people they cast as production is rolling. It's another one of these examples that they don't really want to change. They're just trying to navigate this sort of social media criticism of them in real time.
Does somebody like Kim Zolciak complicate our analysis of Jessica?
This is a perfect example of perhaps being racist, but then getting your own show. So you and your husband can then go along in your beautiful white lives. I actually love Tardy for the Party because the kids are so cute. But Kim complicates everything.
Well, I'm also saying it in the context of, in recent years on Bravo, the idea is like, we have all these all white casts. Let's add a woman of color and stir and see what happens. But like, Atlanta was the first integrated cast, right? Because you have at least one white woman with very problematic ideas, and in a cast that's predominantly African American. So like, does that, I don't know if that's going anywhere, but like, does that change how we think of this evolution or trajectory of like adding in a person of color and suddenly it's controversial to audiences? Everyone's silent. So.
Well, I have yes, Max. But also, let's go back to Kim. I was just thinking of how to say this. I always think it's interesting, and I think Atlanta does get the bad quote unquote rap on everything. We bring in Kim, who's in a relationship. She's basically a mistress to a man of color. And I just think it's interesting that that's where she makes her debut on Atlanta, because increasingly I've been looking at this parallel between Atlanta and Potomac. And kind of middle class morality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that Kim, in addition to her personality, was she a good fit for Atlanta? I think she was, but I also think that's also kind of, I don't know what I'm saying.
You were going somewhere that sounded good.
I was going somewhere, but I don't know what I need that last little piece to put it together. So I'll just go with yes. So Roa was the first integrated cast, and that was interesting.
Well, I think it's time now for our Bonko Party game break. Please. And I'm gonna put the caveat in here that this is the first ever Bonko Party that I am not in charge of. I relinquished the game just for today to Max because I can't work the soundboard. So I asked him to select 6 television themes, and he is going to play them for us, and the 3 of us are going to try to write down what the themes are, and whoever identifies the most themes correctly wins. And then Max won't do Bonko parties again. They'll come back to me. The official name...
That's not true. That's not true. I'm taking this over.
The official name for this game today is Name That Tune. Take it away, Max. This is killing me.
I know it is. All right.
Oh, Max is in charge. I can cheat.
Do we shout out the show, or do we just keep it to ourselves to the end?
Oh, let's really shout it out. Casey's OCD is just like going overtime right now.
If we shout it out, then like we won't all get it. I thought we would just write it down, and then Max would let us say what we thought it was.
Okay, I will.
Max and Jessica are enjoying this way too much. They can like really see I'm squirming with this.
The power. The power.
Okay, so Max, what are the rules? Do we scream it out or do we write it down?
Write it down, and then if somebody clearly knows what it is and other people are stumped, you can scream it out.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we'll do it that way.
Okay.
Compromise.
Okay.
Like Solomon. All right. I'll just play these in random order. Some of these songs have lyrics, so I got the instrumental versions of them instead. So if you're thrown off by that, that's why. Some of them I only did like shorter clips of, so that you don't hear what the lyrics are, because like some of the lyrics are literally like the song.
Good times.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. And some of these, I don't know if Casey said this, but some of these are from Bravo TVs, and then some of these are 70s theme songs, TV theme songs.
Roll it.
All right.
I'm so nervous. I'm very confident.
Okay.
I started easy.
Okay.
We're ramping up.
Are we going to shout it out now or later?
Kate, did you know what it was?
Yes.
Okay, you want to
Shout it out.
All right. Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding.
Oh, I so failed that one. I had OC. I so failed.
It's really interesting how the different Real Housewives franchises are all slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
I instantly heard Lisa Vanderpump in my head.
Throw
Me
me to
too.
the wolves. I'll come back leading the pack. Is that what her... I heard it too.
I meant Real Housewives Beverly Hills.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, man.
I have no idea.
I am so confident.
Kate.
What do you say, Kate?
I know I've heard it, but I cannot think of what song it is. I know it's not Chips. I'm like,
It's not Chips.
Is it Starsky and Hutch?
It's not Starsky and Hutch.
Who Shot JR?
Yeah.
That was the Dallas theme song.
Yeah, in
the
honor.
original Dallas theme song.
Yeah, in
I
honor.
was way off.
Yeah, I figured. So on Dallas, there's like a big plot line going on right now in the original. They're in JR's house,
They are indeed.
and they're like spending the night. And Brandy, in fact, was the one who got right. It was Brandy. Yeah, Brandy got drunk and messed up the actual set
With
that was-
Carrie.
With Carrie. JR's bedroom from the show.
Like they have it all blocked off, so no one is supposed to go in there when you go on the tour. But that carries a problem. I mean, Brandy and Carrie together, terrible.
More destructive than Ramona and Sonia.
Oh, by far.
What other insult could there be in Dallas, in Texas, but to desecrate the scene where JR was shot?
I don't know. When Ozzy peed on the Alamo, that was pretty bad.
That was pretty bad too. That one was pretty bad.
All right.
Okay, next.
Any ideas?
Not really.
I made a guess, and it could be completely wrong.
Oh.
I'm going to be so embarrassed. I guessed Charlie's Angels.
No.
Oh, that's what I guessed.
I thought Charlie's Angels too when I was
Okay,
thinking
I feel
of this.
better that you guessed that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought MacGyver. I felt it was some,
You're all on the right track.
but so not.
And in fact,
Is it Magnum PI?
no, it's not Magnum PI.
Was it Starsky and Hutch?
No, not Starsky and Hutch. It was the Bionic Woman.
I almost said Bionic Man. Oh man,
yeah.
I should have known that. I love Bionic Woman and
Yeah.
Bionic Man.
Yeah. I love Bionic Woman and Bionic. I watched both of those. Like in syndication, obviously.
I watched it when it ran. Thank you.
I wasn't going to call you Alan. Okay. Okay. Kate, any ideas?
I know this one. Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Jessica?
I'm going to go with Atlanta, too.
Kate?
I thought it was New York.
Jessica and Kate have it. Real
Wow.
Housewives of Atlanta.
I almost went New York because I was thinking about the DJ scratching a little bit, and then I realized I was talking about like Ramona's New York, and so that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
They had one instrumental theme that was the Atlanta soundtrack, but it had the New York taglines on it. I thought about using that.
Oh God, that would have been so
That would have
confusing.
been so mean.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
I had to cut. This is one of those that I had to cut because.
Now I could be wrong, so if I sing with it and I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I've embarrassed all 70s
Do you want me to
kids.
play it again?
Yes. The love boat, soon you'll be da 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 da. The love boat.
What'd you have, Kate?
I didn't have anything. I'm really embarrassing myself that I don't know any of the 70s theme songs, but I only know the Real Housewives.
Yeah. Casey?
I wrote the Love Boat when Jessica started singing it.
Oh, that doesn't count.
Soon we'll be making another run.
That counts when you and Jessica play.
But there's also times you give us a dirty look and say it doesn't count.
And this is Bonko Party. I can make my own rules.
I feel like this is you guys getting back at me for almost 2 years of Bonko parties.
Oh, it is.
When?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So is that all of them? Or do
There's
we have
one
one
more.
Oh, okay. Because I feel like I've won this show.
There's actually 2 more.
Okay, great.
Oh, 2 more.
believe.
You made 7?
I made 8.
Oh.
Music is Max's thing, and that's where he and I really come together. So,
Oh, we did this one. Sorry. Right?
No, this is a different one.
this is a new one.
Good sign. Really?
Yeah, this is a third Real Housewives song, Max.
Oh, I remember what I did. Why I'm confused. I'll give a hint. This one's a little bit more deep in the archives of shows of Real Housewives shows.
What?
This is a little bit like older. This isn't like a current
This
theme
is
that's used.
this
Is
is
this-
an old theme.
But it's not Real Housewives of DC.
It is not Real Housewives of DC.
Are you saying it's a retired franchise?
No.
It's an ongoing franchise, but their theme song
Yeah.
is updated.
Yeah, they've changed the theme song in recent years.
Is it New York?
That's what I thought too, but I thought it was like an old New York.
I was going to go New York.
Ding, ding, ding. It is the
Oh.
first season of Roni.
Yeah, for some reason I was like getting a lot of Jill Zarin in my head. But
Yeah, I was
but
putting a lot of
it
New York
didn't-
money.
It didn't fit with like the new music for their taglines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what's number 7?
No, when I heard that, it sounded like Beverly Hills. So
Oh, it didn't. I didn't.
See ya.
It's
It didn't?
different. Yeah.
Kate.
Kate, yeah, because I have 2 very different answers. Kate?
I have no idea. I really was hoping like a Barney Miller or something. These I know. I don't know. I think I'm clearly showing that I know most of the sitcom songs, and so all of the dramas that you've pulled, I don't really know. Although I don't know what Love Boat is. Not really a...
What?
You haven't seen Love Boat?
I have never seen Love Boat.
What?
Oh,
That
what would
wasn't
you
Love
consider
Boat.
the drama?
No, what I just played?
I
that
think it's a
wasn't-
game show.
Oh.
It is a game
Was
show.
it a game show?
It is a game show from the 70s.
Can you run it again?
Yeah,
With that clue?
Wait. I want my half point.
No.
I get. Wait, I want a bonus point for knowing it was a game show because that changes it for everybody else.
It does.
I don't think
does.
Jessica would have got this if she didn't know it was a game show.
But I was going to say it was a game show
But
either
I
way.
said it.
Okay, so what's the answer?
I think it was the Newlywed Game.
No.
Oh,
That's exactly
good
what
one.
I put in. It was either that or yeah, I got nothing. I thought it was Newlywed Game or Price is Right.
Do you have a guess, Kate?
Well, I know it's not The Price is Right. That's one I definitely know. I don't know. I guess I'll jump onto the Newlywed Game.
In recent years, Alec Baldwin has taken over hosting duties of this game show.
The Pyramid? Let's Make a Deal?
Match game.
What's Match Game?
Oh.
Where they have 6 celebrities on a panel and one contestant. They ask the contestant something, the contestant has to write it down, and they have to match one or all 6 of the
You couldn't just do hip hop squares or Hollywood squares. I don't even know.
Can I take a half point?
Fine.
Fine,
I'll
whatever
give you
you
the
want.
point.
Casey.
I'll take a half
Jeez.
point, a quarter point.
Casey's waking up the child sleeping next to her.
My indignance.
All right, last one.
Okay.
Oh, Jessica, you have to.
Thank you.
You definitely know this, Jessica. You definitely know this. I know for a fact you know this.
I don't think I know.
Thank you, Max, for finally giving me a 70s show that I know.
Yeah.
Okay, Kate, what is it?
Good times.
Good times.
Oh, yeah. I almost
Yeah.
put the qualifier out there. This is the qualifier about Good Times. I was raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. I never watched Good Times until I was an adult. It didn't air there.
Oh.
So it's not endemic to my 1970s knowledge.
Okay.
Take my black card away from me.
I got 2.5 points.
Had you just let the words run, I would have been okay.
Yeah, I know, but that's the problem. Okay. So we have a tie
Oh.
between Jessica and Kate.
Oh.
Casey has lost.
I'm
Yeah.
actually shocked that Max didn't do 66 Batman.
I thought about that, but it's all Batman. Like it just sort of gives away the entire plot. So we have a tie between Jessica and Kate.
What do we win?
Accolades and the knowledge that you beat Casey.
It wasn't going to be hard to do.
Ooh, let's have a round
Oh, wait.
of applause or a victory lap.
Victory lap. Hold on. Oy.
You didn't watch.
Congratulations.
So, just so I'm clear, you all have never watched The Love Boat, which means you also didn't watch Fantasy Island that often ran right after it. Do you know who Mr. Rourke is?
No. I watched Gilligan's.
The plane.
The plane. You don't know who. I mean, that looking back about how ableist that was.
Yes.
I'm just going to
Oh,
leave
yeah.
it there. Okay, so, all right, let's bring it on back. Thank you, Kate, for helping me to claim victory over one Casey.
Yeah, you did a great job. Tied, you beat Casey, and that's really the point of this game. Is to
That
just
was
defeat
really great.
Casey.
Let's do one of these a year because I don't think she can handle anymore.
I think this just might be what we're doing from now on, where I come up with the games. I like this
I
power.
came up with this game. I asked you to help me.
I like,
Okay,
I like this
so-
power.
So, as a historian who writes about sitcoms, Kate, what is your favorite past or current show?
Well, if we're talking about a sitcom, one of my favorite sitcoms is Superstore. Have any of you watched it?
No.
I watched it. I don't watch
Oh,
it
no.
regularly, but I know that I've watched it.
I like Superstore, but my favorite TV show that's not a sitcom is Mad Men.
Batman's good. What did you think of the finale?
I liked the finale. I thought it was very. I really liked the finale because it's so the way that they presented Don Draper at the end is still sort of like driven by exploiting youth culture in a way to make profits at this larger. Gosh, it is the end of the semester, isn't it? Oh God, I liked the finale. I liked it. Oh. Sorry, I think I crashed and burned on that.
That's
one.
okay.
No, it's totally fine. This is going to get edited, and when you hear it back later, you're going to be like, wait, were we this stream of conscious? Were we this crisp with our thoughts? I don't remember.
Right.
That. Yeah,
right.
It'll be fine.
So let's go back into a conversation of the Bravo firings in June of 2021 after the murder of George Floyd. And I wanted you to talk to us about how this relates to themes in your research and how we should think about all of this in longer histories of television. If you wanted to in any way, if you had thoughts about Stassi's attempted comeback tour, wherever you want to go with all of this.
Okay. For the Bravo firings in June of 2021, Bravo could have fired these same people for what they did at the time during which they did them, but they chose to do it in June of 2021, obviously in response to public outrage after the murder of George Floyd. And I think because they waited to fire these people, it didn't come across as genuine, as if Bravo was, genuinely remorseful for the, keeping these people on television, and specifically with the two guys that they brought on to Vanderpump, Max, and what was the other one's name?
Max and from Vanderpump Rules. Max will remember these names.
Yeah.
What were the guys' names on Vanderpump Rules that were fired?
Brett.
And
Brett, yeah.
Max.
Yeah.
I mean,
good job, Max.
They went. Yes, thank you.
It took me a second too.
But the really old tweets that were really racist, I mean, that came out way before 2021, and there was public outrage against how could Bravo, not know this, and then upon finding out, still, not edit them out of the show or continue to film them. And so just this, taking as long as they did to finally, I guess, quote unquote, punish these people for their behavior didn't seem genuine. But I will say the act of actually trying to do something to demonstrate to the public that you are taking accountability, that is not new. That actually has a longer history. Specifically after the assassination of Martin Luther King in 1968, there was a reckoning with the television industry that publicly expressed that they played a role, or at least they thought that they had a role in the racial unrest in the United States at the time. And one of the things that they did was create a bunch of special programs, which allows networks to create on a shorter time frame. So it allowed them to sort of respond in closer to real time than an actual scripted show. And they had a couple of shows in particular. One was called Of Black America, that was aired on CBS. And that was about the Black side of American history. And that aired in the summer, right after Martin Luther King was assassinated. So he was assassinated in April, and these aired in the summer. Another one was Time for American on ABC. That was on, it aired, it showed reverse confrontations between white and Black Americans. And it's interesting because in the summer after June of 2021, did the same thing with Race in America, where they essentially gathered all of the women of color from the different Bravo series and had them talk about their experiences with racism. So it was a similar type of response. And then in addition to those types of shorter, almost in real-time shows that are very quick and easier to produce, the inclusion of more Black representation following these moments happened in 1968 and also in 1992 after the LA uprisings as well. And so to give an example, in 1968, there were over 21 television shows that aired in the fall that had recurring Black cast members, as opposed to, I think it was only 7 in 1967. So there was a dramatic increase in Black representation in response to the racial unrest after King's assassination. And then you see the same types of efforts with Bravo in trying to diversify their white franchises as well. So I don't know of any previous instances where people were actively fired, but at the same time, I feel like that's a special circumstance because reality television is meant to, be sort of like the fly in the wall of people's lives where they are saying and doing things that supposedly aren't scripted. So you do get a sense of more of how they're thinking or responding to, different people or events in a way that a scripted television show isn't going to do. So I think that response by Bravo is really specific to reality television in particular. But Bravo had a long history, as we've talked about, of kind of turning a blind eye to racist comments made by the people that they hire to be on these shows for a really long time. And so they're just finally now starting to show that they're making an effort, although I think it does come across as being superficial.
So you've coined this term educational entertainment as it relates to Bravo. Could you first define it for us and then maybe give some examples of how it manifests in your work and maybe on Bravo TV as well?
Sure. I use the term educational entertainment to reflect the changes in the television industry, specifically during the Kennedy era. And what I mean by educational entertainment is that, when there was a concern that television was used in a way that was negatively influencing the American public because it was so fluffy and it just didn't have any sort of moral backbone to any of the content that was being presented. It was thought that it was doing a disservice to the American people, and so you have pressure from the political side to say that there had to be more of a moral a moral fiber to these television shows, and that we had to create shows that had more meaning and were more impactful and could be could actually teach people about different things, especially with the growing viewer base, with the increase in television sets across the United States by the early 1960s. And one of the things that broadcasters found by trying to appease the FCC and create more educational television was that they were making the argument that the American public didn't really want to watch educational television. They were increasing the amount of documentaries they were making, and they weren't getting as wide of a viewership. Newton Minow, the chairman of the FCC at the time, said that broadcasters needed to sacrifice profits if it meant creating better, quality television. Of course, this is not something that broadcasters wanted to do. And so one of the ways that they found that they could ensure their profits while at the same time appeasing the FCC was to embed educational content into entertainment television. And so this is where you'll get like a television show like Mr. Novak in the early 1960s that, talks about integrating public schools, and they always have these like moral themes to each episode. And so looking at entertainment television that is meant to educate the public and how that changes over time is a thread that runs through my research. Now, what I have found with Bravo's response to the past year is that they are trying to do this, I feel like, with some of the people that they are adding to the television shows. And the best example that I have is with the addition of Leva to Southern Charm. If anyone has watched the most recent season of Southern Charm, one of the main storylines through that season, and it really is because of Leva, is Catherine Dennis, who got into an argument with a Black radio personality in Charleston. And through this DMing and messaging of back and forth, Catherine uses these monkey emojis. Obviously, this is racist. And apparently she also said something about accusing this person of not having a father or something like that. I can't even remember what the exact attack was that Catherine did. But the DMs were leaked to the press. And so now Catherine is under fire for these racist messages. And what's interesting about this season of Southern Charm is you really get the impression that had it not been for Leva, the network was not going to address it beyond maybe an episode. And it was really Leva that kept it going. The other castmates, the other white castmates, I should say, did not, particularly find this a topic worth drawing out. They seemed to feel like, Catherine said this, she didn't mean it that way. And if she did, she didn't realize it was bad. And, why beat a dead horse? So they just really didn't take it seriously. But I think that Bravo, in addition to trying to address the situation to sort of take the heat off of the, Bravo TV, at the same time, Leva is not just educating Catherine Dennis on the show, but she's also educating the viewers who are watching the show about why these statements were offensive, about why certain imagery, like the statue of the Calhoun statue that sits at the center of Charleston, how that might make people of color in that area feel. She's really speaking to the audience as much as she's speaking to her castmates. So I see that as the biggest parallel between what Bravo TV is doing to respond to the uprisings after George Floyd and my own research.
So, Kate, since your research originally thought about TV representations of feminism, and if regular everyday women who do not identify as feminists or participate in movements change the way they view gender, women's rights, based on what they watched on TV, pause. I am wondering if this is also something you think about it as it relates to Real Housewives.
It is. I don't know if it's something that I have thought about before as much. So I guess I'll give a little bit of context to the question. When I originally started this project, my dissertation, I should say, my original research question was, I wanted to know if women didn't participate in feminism or the women's liberation movement at all, what was it that made certain women change the way they thought about their relationships at home with their spouses, maybe in the workforce, maybe even thinking about their positionality in society as a whole. So what made them think differently about their gender role if they didn't participate? And when I went to the archive, I realized that the white men who dominated the television industry really could care less about representing women or their ideas or their relationship to women's liberation or anything like that. And so, but they did emphasize, realism and reality in that way. And so I sort of took off with that. But the general sentiment still stands, which is, how do people learn about political ideas or opinions or the perceptions or experiences of other people if they're, if they are sort of in their bubble? And how does television allow us to learn about those experiences? And so I am interested when television tries to bridge, those two things for people. I know we talk about social media as like building community and all of this stuff, but I mean, it's become abundantly clear in the last couple of years that social media creates these silos for people who share their own personal views and political opinions. And where I think Bravo TV has the ability to change that is when they do depart from the type of programming that once had, and like this past season of Southern Charm as an example, right? Anybody who normally watches Southern Charm knows what to expect, but this was really quite different in the way that they talked about race in a way that they had not done before. And so now you've already got an audience who are watching because they normally watch Southern Charm, and so now they're getting a different a different perspective by watching the show. Now, this is not to say that everyone watching the show likes what they're watching or agrees with it or uses it as this learning experience. But I guess I am interested in thinking about what is the takeaway people are getting from watching these types of shows.
Is there anything else you want to say about Southern Charm to tie up these themes of liberalism, civil rights, and representations on screen?
That's a good question. I think that Bravo's response actually really makes it abundantly clear what the limits of this term cultural liberalism are. And that is to say that, especially because you have Bravo TV, which has all of these different franchises that are very much segregated, and they're in their attempts to try to, integrate different types of cast members into these all-white shows. You can really see the limits of cultural liberalism, especially with this sort of colorblind approach to remedying some of the issues that they think that they have.
I think that brings us back to what Jessica was thinking about earlier in terms of what are the limitations of the approach of cultural liberalism.
That is exactly what I was thinking.
And you just hadn't finished your coffee enough to get there, but I think we've come full circle.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely would like to add to that, because I don't want it to seem like cultural liberalism is this great thing that, I'm very aware of the limitations of it. And a lot of the television producers, they approached the integration of Black writers and Black actors with this colorblind race perspective that where it prevented them from understanding why this attempted integration of the entertainment industry wasn't working out the way that they thought it would. And this is really exemplified by the show Good Times, that there was so much tension between the Black cast members and the white producers. And even though they did integrate more Black writers into the show, there was tension between the Black writers and the white writers. And I think that the failure to say that this tension is obviously illustrating the structural racism that is embedded within the entertainment industry. I think that a lot of the white television producers viewed it as just being difficult. It was, you can hear in some of the later reflections as people talk about the show, it was a very difficult show to produce. It was a difficult show to make because there was so much tension, as opposed to using those difficulties to properly self-reflect on why it was difficult. And so I think that is what is happening with Bravo right now. And I think this is why, following the 1968 uprisings after Martin Luther King's assassination, following the uprisings in 1992 in Los Angeles and then across the U.S., and then following the uprisings in 2020, television personalities, television networks, television producers, everyone is having this moment where they feel like they are just now starting to understand how they have been complicit in this tension, this failure of the American people, especially white Americans, to understand race relations, all of this stuff. But what they're not realizing is that, they're thinking of themselves as being complicit and now trying to reckon with it is actually part of a longer history, number one. And their reckoning with it is not really, it's not going to change anything if you're not able to really self-reflect on why and how you've been complicit this entire time.
So, fun question. Who is your favorite Bravo celebrity and why?
Candy Burris is my favorite Bravo celebrity. I think it would be a tie between her and Portia, and for totally different reasons. Do I have to pick one? Can I have two?
You can have two.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to have two. Portia. Portia, I feel like, what you've talked about on the show, like her narrative arc continuously evolves. She has not been the same person throughout the whole entire show, with her marriage and divorce and relationships and the baby. And she just continuously evolves. And so she's always sort of piquing your interest. And she's really funny. So she always brings that comedic element to the show as well. So I really appreciate her, like one-on-one interviews. I always like Portia. Candy, I like, she's not as exciting as Portia. So it's kind of funny that I like both of these women, but, much like Candy, I also cry every time I get really mad. So I guess I just really identify with who she is, and I just like her. And I think that on the show, you always have to have the voice of reason. Like, you cannot have a show of just Kenyas and just Portias. There always has to be those other personalities to balance it out. And I've just always enjoyed watching Candy on the show as well.
Where Candy can actually be a strong, like, A lead, or she can be like the really important supporting B role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versatile.
Yes, very versatile.
Max is laughing at me because I'm working out my opinions on Candy.
Oh, you don't like Candy? I want to know. Tell me.
I used to like Candy. This is going to get us completely off topic, but there's implications, or there's allegations that T.I. and Tiny are participating in kind of a
alleged sex cult.
Alleged sex cult. And so for me,
I have not heard this.
Oh yes, this is all the news in the last month.
This
or
is
so.
why Jessica also goes by JMZ.
JMZ. Okay.
Oh.
So I'm working out my opinion on Candy. I'm all for sexual freedom, but there's this weird tension that Candy plays between being horrified that it would be alleged that she had drugged someone. I understand being horrified. But then she's playing the dominatrix in the dungeon, the actual show, in the show she travels with, and then on Real Housewives. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out this line
with her ongoing relationship with Tiny and T.I.
and her ongoing relationship with Tiny and T.I. So I mean, I'm not saying that tell me who you're with and I'll tell you who you are. I don't know. I'm still processing my breakup with Tiny and T.I.
That maybe Phaedra was
right.
a little
right
circling something. Maybe?
I think Phaedra was circling something. I really do. And I think Candy has the power to actually get Phaedra booted off the show. So I have had to break up with Tiny and T.I. a little bit based on the allegations. And so I think what you were hearing in me is like, I think I might have to break up with Candy if all this proves true.
If it proves true that she knew.
Yeah, that's all.
I mean,
I'm struggling. That's what you hear me struggling with.
What she would say about that dynamic between being sort of mortified by what's going on, but then also like her public image.
Yeah.
Is this is just me saying what I think she would say, is that her horrifiedness, her shock at these allegations come from the lack of consensuality.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's exactly. Spoken like a Sharon Block student, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
And that's a key, and that's an important key line. That's, it's the consent issue. So as much as I like Candy, I'm just, I don't want to have to break up with her.
You're protecting yourself.
I'm going to have to read about this.
I think I'm protecting myself, yes.
Yeah. You're trying to like internally process and kind of grieve what might be coming.
Yes. See, clearly they have worked through this with me because I was like, oh my gosh, no. So anyway, so Candy's a fine choice. Just because I'm going through a process doesn't mean that detracts from her being great on the show.
Well, I would like the record to reflect that I am unaware of this, this alleged.
Kate immediately goes into PR mode of like, I had no idea of these allegations. I was not even on the coast that Candy was on when these occurred.
Yeah.
Today, I thought we would do a segment that I'm calling Coffee Clatch, where you can recommend further reading as like a compendium to your episode. So this would be where you could suggest a few, secondary sources or TV shows or something for people to look into if they want to have a deeper dive into this topic. For example, as you were speaking at the very beginning about Emmett Till and his funeral, I thought of Ruth Feldstein's chapter in the Not June Cleaver anthology by Joanne Meyerowitz that came out in the 1990s called it's called the whole world can see. And it's about Emmett Till's funeral and the televising of the funeral. So as an example of like what I'm thinking about in terms of suggested
readings to go along with this fine episode.
Yeah, to like give people more space to explore.
And Kate, you can actually reference yourself as well.
Totally.
Well, as soon as I publish something, I'll let you know. You don't have to put that in the podcast. I do, which I hope to soon. But anyways, yes, I have some. I do have some recommendations. I had already mentioned earlier Daniel Widener's book, Black Arts West, which is a really good book to. Danny's book talks a lot about the grassroots Black cultural movements in the 1960s. I think he might go up through the 90s, if I remember correctly. But nonetheless, I would recommend his book. Also, Allison Perlman's book. And actually anything by Allison Perlman, because she writes a lot about TV and politics together. So she's a really good source to look at television policy in particular. And also Elana Levine. She is a television historian who writes a lot about 1970s television in particular. She has a book called Wallowing in Sex, which is about representations of sex and sexuality in television. And she has a new book that just came out in 2020 called Her Stories, and it's all about the soap operas in the soap industry, which I have not had a chance to read yet, but it is sitting on my desk. It is next. So I guess I would say those three recommendations.
Allison's book is titled Public Interest.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I didn't say that. Yes, Public Interest. Yeah. And she's also at Irvine.
She is. She's my advisor.
Yes. Oh, great. So you know her.
Yeah. I've read that book a few times.
Yeah.
So, Kate, can you tell us what's next for you and what you want people to know about your upcoming work, and how can they get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of finishing two academic articles on, one is related to television representations of feminism and using TV to arouse women's consciousness on gender issues. And the second article is actually very related to what I talked about in the podcast today, which is specifically thinking about, cultural liberal responses to the 1968 assassination of Martin Luther King. And so I specifically talk about the show Julia in that article, and how white viewers viewed the show as a method of forced integration into their homes. In addition to that, I'm revising my dissertation and hope to have that in book form one day. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter. I don't remember what my handle is. I think it might be KL Flach, but if you just look me up, you can find me. And then also I have a website that has my email address, that you can contact me there. It's just kateflach.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
I hope you had fun.
I did. I had a lot of fun.
As always, you can find us at historiansonhousewives.com, where you can propose your own episode topic, ask us questions, and send us feedback. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HistoriansH. And don't forget that you can like and review the podcast on your podcast platform. You can also find us at our Etsy shop, Historians Housewives. This episode was powered by Acast. Thank you, Kate Flach. This show was brought to you with the support by Barbara and Mark Spear, Saddleback Community College, Molly Callahan, Dr. Joaquin Galarza, Courtney Crow, Lara Loper, Kim Bettendorf, Luis Acio de Dios, and the Achipon Foundation. And remember, scholars do bravo too.